Fantastic. Great. Thank you very much. All right. So welcome to this little 6med webinar on personal statement top tips. So roughly be about an hour, hopefully a little bit less. We're going to have lots and lots of questions at the end. If you want to ask me anything, of course. So I'll go ahead and just tell you what we're doing. So who am I? My name's Joe. If you've been to any of these previously, when we used to have them on a Thursday afternoon, I've presented two of them so far. So I'm a medical student at Barts in London. So it's part of Queen Mary University of London. So I have done my preclinical years there, and I've currently taken a year out and I'm intercalating at the Royal Veterinary College, and I'm currently doing research in London. So I'll be returning to medicine next year. So that's kind of who I am. If you have any questions and you'd like to email me, my email address is here at the bottom. And this lecture is recorded, so you can always go back, see the slides, and contact me. So if that's who I am, what I would like to know is, who are you guys? So if you're on Menti, you can answer. If you're a year 11, year 12, year 13 student, if you're gap year, anything else other, fantastic. If you're not on Menti yet, www.menti.com, and you use the code 31380262. Fab. So we've got a good number of year 12 students, got a year 13 student and a couple of other. Oh, fantastic. You're a gap year student too. Fab. I'm always just curious to see who my audience are. Brilliant. Cool. Well, thanks very much, everyone. What we'll do is we'll move on. Cool. So we've got 11 year 12. So mostly year 12 students. Cool. So that's the kind of, you're in your kind of first year of sixth form. We've got someone who's final year of sixth form, etc. Cool. Brilliant. So what we're covering today. So I assume if you've managed to make it this far and you've managed to log into Zoom, etc., then you know what we're covering today. And that is my kind of opinion, my top tips of what I think are really important for you when writing your personal statement. So what we're going to go over is what is a personal statement? What is a medical personal statement? Because a medical personal statement is actually slightly a unique type of personal statement. It's not like your usual, if you're applying for history or English lit, for example. What are my kind of top tips? And then I'm going to give you a couple of examples of excerpts from personal statements. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end where you can ask me anything about personal statements, anything that I didn't explain well, or just anything about medicine in general or what it's like being a student. Cool. So what I want to know first of all is, how confident are you at writing a medical personal statement? This is what I'd like to know. How much do you guys know? Do you, is it not a clue? Are you feeling fairly confident? Or are you very much bring it on? I'm ready. I'm just here to see whether you're saying all the right things, Joe. Cool. Okay, so we've got a good proportion, not a clue. That's good. That's a good starting point. We've got one person bring it on. Fantastic. So we've got another expert on the panel. This is good. Not a clue, fairly confident. Cool. Brilliant. Okay. All right. If you haven't signed up or logged on to Menti yet, you're more than welcome to do so. Otherwise, we'll keep going. Cool. Brilliant. So we've got about 57% not a clue, which is a good starting point. So we're gonna come back to this later and see whether you know a little bit more. So what is a medical personal statement? So essentially what a personal statement is it's a document. Here I've described it as detailing your motivation, exploration, and suitability for studying medicine. But what it really is when you're applying to UCAS, so that's the United Kingdom college, the universities and college application system. When you're applying to UCAS, you will be you'll apply with your GCSE or equivalent grades. You'll apply with predicted A-level grades or your A-level grades that you got, or IB or any equivalent. And that's all well and good, and that you will that's your kind of academic portfolio, so to speak. And so the university can sit there and go, okay, well, they've met the requirements for this course. They're predicted to get them, or they've met them previously, or they're quite close. And that's all well and good, because at the end of the day, medicine, there's a lot of very clever people in medicine. Everyone who gets into medicine is an intelligent person. They work hard. What the personal statement there is, the first little, it's basically a short little summary of who you are and why you really want to do medicine. What's the motivation behind this? And different universities will use it in slightly different ways. Some might score it. Some might just use it to get a gist as to whether the candidate's really that interested in medicine. Some will use it as a kind of template for then, during interviews, they'll then discuss things on your personal statement. But that's what a personal statement is. It is a statement about yourself. It's a statement about why do you want to do medicine? So why do you want to do it? What have you done to show that you want to do it? So have you actually shown any interest, and have you learned things about it, and how suitable you are as a candidate too? So we'll get into that in a little bit. So that's what a medical personal statement is. Another unique thing about a medical personal statement is that, just like the dental personal statements or the dental applications, so medicine, dentistry, I believe veterinary, and then for Oxbridge, so Oxford and Cambridge, all of these need to be submitted by the 15th of October, typically, which is earlier than the usual January deadline. The reason is because those courses have interviews, and so you need to have time for that. Whereas, your classic university courses don't interview, except Oxford and Cambridge, which is why they're included in this. Cool. So what I want to ask you guys now is, what do you think a medical personal statement should include? I've already just said that it should be your motivation, your exploration, and your suitability, and that's all great. But tell me what you think. Volunteering? Yep. WEX. What, care to elaborate? Why exactly? Yep. Work experience. Oh, WEX. Okay, work experience. I didn't know that was an acronym. It's very good. Yeah, so work experience. Cool. Yep. Work experience. Interests. Yes, that's good. Insight into reality. I like that. Yep. 100% your insight into reality. Personal experiences. Yeah. So you're going to include some of these personal experiences into actually, well, why do you want to do it? Motivation. 100%. But then I said that on the previous slide. So maybe aspirations. Yeah. So aspirations is an interesting one. And I would argue that there's a little pitfall around that, where medicine is a career where it's a vocational course. So you're doing a degree and then you're going into medicine. You're going to go into foundation year 1, foundation year 2 in the NHS, and then you're going to work in the NHS, or you're going to go off and do private practice, what have you. Or, there's a small percentage of people that will go into research with a medical degree, or actually won't go into medicine, but they have the medical degree. But that's not the main outcome. The worry about, so you have your aspirations as you want to be a good doctor. I've seen some people say, I really want to be a pathologist. And that to me raises red flags. It's quite a good one I read about wanting to be a pathologist. Probably pathology wasn't the best one to pick either, because some students, that kind of shows that maybe they don't particularly like the human side of it. Maybe they don't like the patient interaction side. And that's kind of a red flag. Don't corner yourself and think that you need to go into medicine knowing what you want to do. They want a candidate who knows what medicine is and knows what it's like to the best of their abilities, but doesn't, you can be interested in cardiology, but you don't have to say, I want to be a cardiologist. That's not what they're looking for. Cool. Your unique journey. Yeah, 100%. Skills you've learned. Yes. And how they apply and why you. Yeah. Understanding about yourself. Books you've read. Good. Extracurricular activities. Aspirations, wider reading, yeah, gap year info, etc. Yeah. So certainly with your gap year, you know, if you spent your gap year doing anything that's related to med or building on skills that are related to med, then yeah. Medical societies, yeah, if you're a member of society or something, and this has furthered your understanding. Exactly. Cool. You guys are doing great. We've got a really nice little thought bubble going here. I like how motivation is the key one. A lot of people, you know, what is motivating you? And that, if anything, is possibly one of the hardest things to explain, is what motivates you to get into medicine. It has to be, you want it to be unique, but it doesn't have to be unique. A lot of people will get into medicine in similar ways through personal experiences or what have you. But it's being genuine in that respect. How something affected you? Yeah. And if you're discussing how something affected you, there's a word beginning with R, which is really good here. It's, you are looking back at something, you are personal insight. Yep. Reflection. Yeah, exactly. Reflection. So you're reflecting on your experiences and how they have shaped you and how that makes you a suitable candidate, or how that has made you more motivated. And by reflecting, that shows a level of interest. So you think about, you have tons of experiences every day, but you only reflect on some of them. You don't reflect on going to Tesco's and getting some oat milk or what have you. But you will reflect on other things. And when you think about, if you think about what you think about, you will realize what's important to you. And so if you are reflecting and you have really insightful reflections, that shows that there is an element of real motivation or interest behind that. I hope that makes sense. That was a bit rambly. Cool. So I think we'll move on, but that's fantastic, everyone. That's brilliant. That's exactly what we're looking for. And so all of this is true, and all of this is really important to talk about. But there are a few like pitfalls, and we'll go over that, and I'll tell you how to kind of hopefully cohesively build this. So my top tip, so I've got 5 top tips I'm going to say here. They're a bit generic, you could argue, but then your schools will give you, your schools or your schools should have, or tutors, etc., will give you kind of real help in building a cohesive personal statement. But my first kind of top tip is show, not tell. And I think it's kind of so true in that respect. So when we'll get to an example in a bit, but what I'd say with show, not tell is that the people reading these are admissions, so they're in charge of admissions. Some of them may be doctors, some of them may be researchers, some of them may not be, you know, a consultant or something. They may just be a university academic. But they all know what they're looking for. And there's no point in saying, I show this, I show that, I do this, I do that. You don't need to lay it out in layman's terms. Show through your own experiences that you have the qualities of a doctor. And so this kind of links back to a previous seminar we did a little while ago. It should be recorded if you haven't seen it, on the qualities of a doctor. And I would say this is probably the most important part, is showing you've got those qualities. And what you want to do is you want to have evidence for everything. And so when you have, I'm just trying to think about how the best to word it. When you are kind of showing what it means to be a good doctor, you want to embed that within an example in yourself. There's no point in saying I'm compassionate. Great, okay, well done, you wrote you're compassionate. It doesn't mean that you are compassionate. If you give me an example where you show compassion, you don't have to tell me, and I show compassion. I should be able to read it and go, gosh, that person showed compassion, and that is what a good doctor has. It's like reading a book. A personal statement is, in a way, a bit like a very good novel, a very good story. It doesn't have to have lots of plot twists or what have you, but it has to have that element of showing, not telling. And if anything, the closest you've come to writing something similar like this is your English literature or English language GCSEs, if you took those, or equivalents. And if you did an A-level in a literature kind of subject, very similar. My other one is kind of reflect, as I said, reflect on your experiences. There's no point in saying, I did this. I've shown this by doing this. I've shown motivation to do medicine by joining a society at school, a biomedical society at school. First of all, you don't need to say that you've shown that, because just by writing, I joined a biomedical society shows you're interested. But it's no good in saying I joined a biomedical society. Anyone can do that. You need to say, what did you learn? And what did you learn from that experience? And how has it bettered you? So we're thinking now again about the exploration. If we think that a personal statement is your motivation, your exploration, your suitability for medicine, reflecting on your experiences is really about your furthering your exploration of medicine. And this is where you want to kind of show that you're an active learner. This is at the core of it, really, is showing that you're an active learner, showing that you are learning about medicine and you want to further your interests. And so you reflect on your experiences. And within those reflections, you can talk about your kind of suitability for medicine, or show it rather than talk about it. And we'll get onto that in a little bit. But I would say always reflect on your experiences. The best examples are ones where you show a kind of level of self-critique within your personal statement. So then you might have made a mistake during work experience or something. Someone may have got hurt, preferably not badly, but someone may have got hurt, or there was some sort of accident, or there was some mishap, and you reflect on that and you think, actually, you know, I maybe was a little bit at fault here, or maybe I didn't fully understand something. How can I better that? And how can I rectify this? And showing that kind of internal monologue and reflecting on something that happened and how that makes you a better doctor is so much better than saying, I went on a respiratory ward and I was surprised at how good the doctors were at talking. But like, it doesn't show that much. So that's what I'm talking about when I say reflect on your experiences. And again, with these experiences, so one of the biggest things everyone was saying on the word cloud was work experience. And 100% work experience is kind of the foundation for a lot of these experiences you're going to say here. And it's true that you should have like good work experience, but you don't need to go in hospitals for it. You barely have to go in GP practices. I would say some of the best work experience you're going to get is a regular care home, or one of the best personal statements I've ever read was by someone who spoke about their experiences working in KFC. Because you've got that patient interaction, customer interaction. Maybe if it was in a hospital, it'd be a patient interaction. You have that customer interaction, you have that kind of problem solving, and that's really translationable. Whereas you can have, I've also seen people who have spent a couple of grand and have gone off to Mozambique to work in a field hospital. And it's all well and good because that sounds really cool. But if you can't reflect on your experiences and you don't show that you've learned something from that, that was useless. So that's what I would say. And so then tip 3 for me is kind of always linking back to the core values and attributes of a medical student. And this kind of builds on what I previously said a couple of weeks ago on my last seminar, talking about the qualities of a medical student and the qualities of a good doctor. So because these medical schools are looking, the personal statement is your motivation, your exploration, and your suitability. Motivation and exploration are kind of showed by the motivation to your kind of personal story. Maybe, well, why did you want to go into medicine? And you don't have to give a really in-depth story because they're going to ask you about that at an interview, really. You just need a little bit of background as to why. And I can't really tell you what to write. I can just tell you how to write, and it's to show that you're motivated rather than say, I am passionate about medicine. If you say I'm passionate about medicine, it's like, great, yeah, but show me that you're passionate. So the motivation part's really hard to build on. And I would say it's probably the first and hardest part of the medical personal statement. Exploration is kind of all that work experience, etc. But suitability is really what they're looking for. So that's suitability. Do you have the kind of precursors to being a good medical student? And here I would direct you to things like this. So this is the Medical Schools Council. So they are a kind of consortium so it's basically built by a load of deans of medical schools who wanted a representative body of medical schools. And so this is written by a load of medical schools all working together. And this is a document saying, well, hold on, what do we really want? What should the ideal medical school candidate look like? And so if you want something to base your kind of personal statement, really think, actually, these are the values that I should be showing in my personal statement. This is the document to look at, because, wow, it's built on GMC Good Medical Practice, which is this document here, GMC Good Medical Practice. It's essentially the Bible of modern medicine. This is the qualities of a good doctor. This document is the qualities of a good medical student. And so what they've done in this document here, the Medical Schools Council, is they've gone through GMC Good Medical Practice and they've gone, well, this is what a good doctor should be. And here's what a good medical student should be. So this is what we think our candidates should look like and should act like, and what values they should have, which preempt them of those of a good doctor. And by kind of discussing this and talking about this, and rather than discussing, showing these kind of good values, these kind of core attributes for a medical student, you're showing what it really means to be a good doctor. And I would say that underpins at the end of the day what a medical personal statement should look like. Because if you can show what a good doctor should be, then you're really showing an understanding for medicine, and that you're kind of showing your suitability. So these are, they talk about insight into your own health. And so, if you can the world's your oyster. You can talk about anything really in your personal statement, but if you're linking back to these kind of values, this is what's amazing. But don't be lazy and say, and I've shown good teamwork, because that's just saying it. You want an example, as I previously said. Anyway, I think we'll get back to the Menti. So that was my tip 3. Tip 4, again, quality over quantity. So your personal statement is 4,000 characters, which isn't, it seems like a lot maybe. It's not at all. It's barely anything. It's a side of A4 on size 10 font, I think. So what I would say is the first thing to do is really brainstorm. What do you want to write in your personal statement? If you're going to break it down into, you need to cover 3 main topics: your motivation, your exploration, and your suitability. What kind of things cover that? What kind of experiences have you had? So it might have been experiences you had in school, and that's okay, but be wary that those are experiences that everyone has had. There are really good personal statements where people talk about what things happened in school and why that makes them a good candidate. But you want to kind of talk about your own experiences, and rather, by talking about experiences out of school, you're showing that actually you have put in effort to obtain different experiences through work experience, etc. Teamwork, you might have done D&E or something, what have you. And so you really want to talk about certain experiences, but only pick like 3 or 4. You don't need to talk about everything. This is where people start listing things. They start getting worried and they start listing, well, actually I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this. And that's wonderful. I mean, anyone can do, you could do loads of things, but what really shows is being able to reflect on these and actually learn from them. And this is also where you've read some books. Lots of people like to talk about what they've read. And that's great. Reading a book is fantastic. Not everyone reads books, but it's what you got out of the book. Don't say, I read this book and it made me think about this. Say, I read this book and it made me think about this, so I decided to go and do this, and this made me think about this differently and reflects this, and so then I did this. It needs to be part of a journey. You shouldn't just say, I read this book and it made me think about this. I also then read this book and I liked this. It doesn't show those qualities. It's not showing, you're not really adding much. And so it's a bit of a pitfall to start listing things. So go for quality over quantity. Show some good reflection. Reflective practice underpins modern medicine at the moment. If you can kind of reflect, yeah, I've said enough. And so my kind of final tip is drafts. To prepare for this presentation, I went through my old personal statement and I just looked at the number of drafts. I had about 7 different iterative drafts. I would say the first thing to do is just brainstorm on a piece of paper. Know your target audience. And by know your target audience, I mean, have a look at this medical school's, these core attributes. Have a look at the entry requirements. So for example, I'm part of Queen Mary. So I've just used this website, but if you're applying to medicine, this is MBBS medicine. Look at the entry requirements. Look at what are they looking for. So sometimes they talk about what kind of qualities they want to see in a medical student, what kind of work experience. You notice here they say, we recognise the challenge of obtaining work experience in a period of volunteering in a caring role is equally as valuable. Don't get your knickers in a twist about getting a hospital placement. Gosh, I really, it would be nice to have it, but it's not the be all and end all. But going back to the mentee, what I'm saying is really think about what kind of qualities, what are they looking for, and what kind of experiences relate to this, and what have you done to show your motivation, and start kind of building it. Start thinking, well, actually, my opener should be why I want to do medicine. That's always the kind of segue. Why do you want to do medicine? Segue it in. You don't need to spend much time on that. You just want something, I enjoyed this. You could even just say, well, after doing my GCSEs, I got some good results. And so I did a couple of days in a GP clinic or what have you, or I had an experience in a GP clinic, or my grandma had this or what have you. And that made me think this. And so I thought maybe medicine's for me. And then I did this, and this course I did, or I researched this and I read this paper and it made me think about this. And consequently, I decided to do this. And you can kind of just start at the rabbit hole. This is the kind of, before you jumped into the pit of medicine, what made you think about jumping in? And the drafts will just keep coming. I would say try and start as early as possible. But that's easy for me to say because I'm the kind of person who likes to write papers, like my documents and stuff, kind of in the last couple of weeks or something before a deadline. Diamonds are made under pressure, arguably. But what I would say is the earlier you start, the more time you've got for drafts, and you can keep drafting and keep drafting. You'll know when you've got to the very end and you can't change anymore, when you're literally deciding whether to put a comma here or not, and whether to change they did this or whatever. You're swapping sentences around. When it becomes really incremental changes, then you're kind of done. That's my biggest piece of advice when it comes to that. But really drafts. And if you're still at sixth form of school, what have you, they'll be saying this too. Keep a log of what you're going through, what kind of things you've learned, what things made you think about what. Keep a log, because that will really help you when you're drafting. Sometimes and when you're drafting, just like you write an essay, when you're drafting and you actually go, oh, I could have done a bit more here. It means that you have time to then go and improve, get better at aspects of your personal statement. Improve, add an experience. If you think, oh, well, this doesn't sound great, I should have probably done this, then you have enough time to go and do this. Cool. So that's enough of me waffling. Here's 2 examples that I've plucked out of thin air of personal statements. These are not the whole personal statement. They're not from the same personal statement. They're just little excerpts. They do not have the start of the personal statement because that's kind of personal motivation. And I can show you that, but it's not particularly useful really, because you will not go through the same experiences as these two people. So I thought that these would be better sections. So have a little read. I'm going to pop it in the chat too. And then I'm going to ask you which one you think is best and why. While you're reading this, I'm just going to answer two questions I've got on the Q&A. So someone said, how many experiences should you refer to as a minimum? I mean, it very much depends on it. So this is, I think I'm talking to a load of people here who are at heart scientists. If you're here, then you studied biology and chemistry, and you've got a very scientific brain. This is a ridiculously kind of artistic side of kind of medicine. This is like the most kind of creative aspect of the application. And so actually a lot of candidates find it the hardest part, and there's no true right or wrongs. It's just got to give a good impression of who you are as a person. So how many experiences you should refer to as a minimum? You've got 4,000 characters. 3 or 4, I would say no less than 3. You can keep writing as much as you want, really. But the danger is if you write too much, then you're listing. You're not really reflecting on enough. So if you do say something that you did, it's got to mean something. It can't just be if you write, okay, well, I did this, I read a book. You write that because you're trying to show that you're motivated and you're interested in medicine, and that's great. But I could falsify anything and talk about that. I could say, oh, I did this or I did that. It's fairly meaningless. It shows motivation, but what I want to see is I want to see the qualities of a good doctor. I want to see those. Do you have the kind of the uncut gemstone that the medical school will then cut and refine, and they'll get a beautiful diamond at the end of it? Do you have those kind of starting materials? And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those qualities at the start. So yeah, I would say as a minimum, 3 to 4, but that's really rough and that's so subjective. Is it possible to use one specific experience and branch out from there to show various qualities? Yes, but I wouldn't make it, again, be careful because it's only 4,000 characters. So you want to show different aspects. If it's all based on one situation, that's going to be quite hard because you want to talk about when did you realize you wanted to get into medicine? And then what have you shown? Have you shown that you're interested in it? Using one experience, it could show that you just went through an experience that made you think you liked medicine and you thought about it a lot and reflected. But have you then gone and done something and put in effort to then investigate it further? That's a hard question. I would say to the person with the one specific experience, have a go at just writing and talking about it and see whether it's kind of successful in meeting everything you wanted to talk about. I'd have to see it in person and read it to see whether I would think it's particularly successful. You could do it, arguably. Again, personal statements are actually pieces of artwork, and so there's always a novel way of doing it. But just be careful. How many times should you get your personal statement reviewed? Again, as many times as possible by the right person. You can ask your parents or guardians or friends or family to have a little look at it. You'll want someone who's seen the admissions process, a teacher, a top consultant reviewing your personal statement might not be able to add a huge amount. you kind of want maybe a medical student or someone to have a little look at it. How do you talk about extracurriculars is another good question. How do you talk about them, or do you talk about them? I'd say yes, you talk about them if they helped you. We'll come back to that in a moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask people about these examples, and then I'll come and answer the question about extracurriculars. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop in the chat just a picture of the personal statement and examples. So we've got the two examples here. I've popped it in the chat so people can open it as a PDF or JPEG. And then what I do is I'm going to ask people which example was better and why. So just let me know, which one did you think was better, or were they the same? Who knows? Just give me a little bit of feedback, because I can tell you what I think, but you'd be surprised at how similar everyone's going to kind of think about this. Yeah, I like that. The second one is it was more of a show and tell. Yeah, second example. Second is he used experience personal term. Cool. So I'm just reading these. I hope everyone else is reading them too. You can kind of see that a lot of people agree that the second example is better. Certainly not perfect. Yeah, exactly. And I think whoever wrote the second one, I thought it was better as it had more real life experience. Whereas the first one was academically focused, which made it more generic. Exactly. And so this is where it's really important to kind of don't get trapped into wanting to talk about being academically astute and learning from your academic studies, because that's what your predicted grades are for. Your personal statement is showing other things. Great, you can talk about your, feel free to talk about school and your studies, but specific examples and how they relate to medicine. Yeah, so the second one is it's more reflective, links back to qualities, but the first one does have medical related experience. Okay, I would agree it has medical related experience. Does that intrinsically make it better though? So there's that you say that, but the first one does have medical related experience. If you put yourself into the shoes of a assessor, if you sit there and you go, okay, well, great, they've had some time in A&E, but have they really learned from it? They've only just told me what they saw. Don't know. Just reading these. Second one better, experience about lifeguard, excellent skills. Second one's better, it's clearly unique to the person. Yeah, exactly. And so it's got to be kind of unique. I think that is really important. And so talking about academia was very generic. And I can see people also saying in the chat that B was better. Cool. So what I'll do is, just for ease, people can carry on writing on there, I think. But what I'm going to say is I'm going to say what I thought, really. So kind of breaking down example one, you're going to have to forgive me because I'm going to be looking at what I've also written down here. But it says from a young age, which could be true. It's a little bit of a cliche, but okay. My real fascination in life has been science, in particular the incredible intricacy of the human body. Yep, okay. My passion to discover more about its inner workings fueled my motivation to study medicine. Challenging yet rewarding nature of the job. A little bit generic. I mean, it's true, challenging yet rewarding. Everyone typically says that. It's quite common. So it's challenging yet rewarding nature of the job leaves me certain that I want to pursue it as a career. Great, but how has it? Does it align with your, you haven't really shown me that it aligns with your qualities. This is just a statement. It wasn't really backed up. I said, I think that my chosen A levels have only made me more determined to become a doctor. Didn't really like the I think, felt a bit indecisive. I would probably get rid of that. Only made me more determined to become a doctor while simultaneously allowing me to develop and improve my skills. That is really, what skills? That seems very, very non-specific, very vague. And maybe they're referencing the skills later on. I've become a better problem solver by studying physics and maths. I assume everyone has, while also learning the importance of accuracy and attention to detail. I mean, okay, you've learned that, but here's the pitfall: is you're telling me, you're not showing me. Show me an example where you've learned that you need attention to accuracy and detail. So show me it rather than tell me, and then tell me, kind of show me how that's related to medicine. So what I arguably would have said here is, well, I'll continue and say, so throughout my chemistry and biology A levels, I've been required to engage in practical work. I felt a little bit like required to engage, like, did you not want to engage? To design and construct an experiment, just that. Medicine, of course, involves research, but I feel like you should say that rather than just say experiment and then leave it. It's a bit vague again. I've also become better at communicating with other members of my team. How? Give me an example. Something I witnessed the importance of during my work experience in A&E. Again, an example, please. This isn't wrong. It's totally right. Example 1 is correct. But there needs to be examples here. I would certainly, so coming back to, I've become a better problem solver by studying maths and physics, also learning the importance of accuracy and attention to detail. You know, this was a long list of kind of things that's very non-descriptive, just tells me a load of things. I would have said maybe talk about an example in maths and physics when accuracy was really important. And then say, during my work experience in A&E, I saw an example where, you know, detail and accuracy was really important. So say like, and I saw an important thing where they were inserting a catheter line, and it's actually really important, and they actually had to do a certain amount of mathematics to figure something out, and a drug dose, and actually these skills are translationable, and actually I feel like I'm quite good at this. You kind of see what the gist that I'm getting at here. Let me know if you think I'm just chatting rubbish at the moment. So moving on to example 2, my job as a lifeguard is consolidating understanding for professional responsibilities and safeguarding, such as planning precautionary measures. I mean, it's good. Just felt a little bit buzzwordy. But awareness of public scrutiny and accountability when performing rescue procedures or supervising activities firmly skills that a competent, committed doctor. Cool. Okay, so they appreciate what a competent and committed doctor they kind of appreciate what those kind of skills are, and they're showing that they've got the skills, which is good. Working with disabled children as a swim assistant, I have learned to interact and motivate those with Down syndrome and ADHD. Okay, they've improved their skills. This has been hugely rewarding, enabling me to draw upon my empathetic skills and sensitivity once more. It shows that they've got empathy, sensitivity. It felt a little bit crude, but it's all there. For example, and we've got an example. Woo! For example, this is the first example we've had. Fantastic. One boy with Down syndrome, very anxious, until together we found a supportive position that increases confidence, built trust, create a happier, safer environment in the water for him. Arguably, that shows more empathetic skills and sensitivity than saying, this allowed me to draw upon my empathetic skills and sensitivity once more. Maybe the empathetic and sensitivity skills, that could have just been cancelled out, and I could have just said, for example, one boy with Down syndrome was very anxious and walked into it to get there, blah, blah, blah. Definitely not perfect, but can everyone kind of see how example 1 is better than example 2? I hope. I'm just looking in the chat here. These examples are applicable to all med applicants because majority are not doing science, maths, etc. Exactly, so it's kind of unique. So I would say that example 2 is far better than example 1 for multiple reasons. The first of all being that there's unique experiences being drawn upon. They're very much describing. They're showing, not telling, to an extent. And they're reflecting, and they are showing that they have the skills and qualities of a doctor. Certainly not perfect, don't get me wrong. But I think everyone can appreciate that example 2 is better than example 1. Example 2, funnily enough, was my personal statement. I could probably write a better personal statement now. I dread to look back at it, but this was how many years ago, and it got me into medicine. It got me offers from all my things. So not everyone is going to produce a perfect personal statement. I think the perfect personal statement is something that someone just chases, and they're very like a piece of artwork, like a book. Different people have different opinions on them, and likewise, there are books that generally people have a consensus are excellent books, and people have a general consensus they are rubbish books. But within those, there's slight differences between people and their own personal relationships, etc. will find that they like different parts of the CV, the personal statement, sorry. And so you'll kind of see that everyone here agreed example 2 is better than example 1, but to different degrees. So I hope that helps. Be careful when you're writing about these, because you never know who is going to ask you questions. At an interview at Southampton University, I got asked by a senior lecturer, interesting that you've worked with those with Down syndrome and ADHD. However, that's interesting, and funny enough, my daughter has Down syndrome, and then he discussed a lot with me, and I felt really put on the spot. So I just got distracted by the chat. So someone has just said, I'm just reading this here. I'm not going to read it out, but I'm just going to read. So I think this is a specific example of, can I mention something along the lines? I'm going to answer that in a moment. So Himani, thanks for your question. I'm going to have a little read of that in a moment, and I'll let you know what I think. But again, something that I want to say is personal statements are really hard because everyone has their own unique view, and you're only getting the views of one medical student here. My top tips are generic, and that's because I want similar top tips that everyone would have, but everyone's going to have a slightly different opinion. Cool. So I'm just looking at what people wrote here. Again, everything. I like that everyone kind of felt the same as me and kind of read the same as me. And that's good. And that kind of shows that, you know, maybe there's not a perfect personal statement, but there are personal statements that are obviously better than others. Cool. So what have we covered today? We've covered what is a personal statement. We've done my 5 top tips. We've done a couple of examples. We're going to have a little Q&A. But first, what I want to ask you guys is, at the moment now, how confident are you feeling in writing a medical personal statement? You can put not a clue. That's fine. If I haven't helped at all, that's fully understandable. I'm not expecting everyone to say, bring it on, because I never felt fully confident writing a personal statement. But if people are kind of getting a gist, then that's what I'm really after here. Cool. I'm glad everyone is got a little clue as to what they're doing. Interestingly, we previously had someone at the start of the talk say they were ready to bring it on, and now I've made them feel less confident. Have we lost our person who was very confident? I think maybe I have. Have I put you off? Cool. Fantastic. Okay. So we got 14 people who are fairly confident. That's better. We had significantly less people at the start. So thank you for that. I hope that helped. So kind of moving on to the final bit now. This is my final slide, which is questions. If anyone wants to ask a question on here, please do. Anything, it can be about personal statements, it can just be about medicine. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a little read of the Q&A here. So when you say, how do you talk about extracurriculars? And I said I'd answer this with the examples. And I hope I kind of have answered it with the examples a little bit. Extracurriculars are kind of fundamental to your personal statement, because when you end up talking about just school and the things you've done at school, that doesn't really help, because they're very generic. And unless you can tease a unique experience out of it, you're not really going to be able to talk about much that's very unique. So how do you talk about extracurriculars? Say what you've done, certainly, and how it links to medicine and what you've learned from it. Again, just gonna say for wider reading, do you have any book recommendations? Yes, sorry, I meant to answer this one earlier. Book recommendations. So in my personal statement, I didn't at any point mention reading a book. And maybe that's like a plot hole. Maybe there are some people who believe you should always read at least one book. I had read medical books, but a lot of them can be a bit generic. Lots of people are going to talk about This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. And lots of people are going to talk about that. Lots of people are going to talk about different books. I would say that reading a book and reflecting on something is good, and it shows that you are reflecting, but can you show the qualities that you then saw in the book? So you went on work experience and you saw something. How does that then link to you? So do you show that same quality? Did you not realize that that was a quality of a good doctor, and actually you sought to benefit, you sought to improve in that area? That's what I would say. You can talk about anything in theory, just as long as you write it well and you are evidenced. When should I start drafting my personal statement? As soon as possible, arguably. What is it? April now. If you're applying for this year, October. I started writing mine June, July. No, that's a lie. August, September, October. Wow, I did it in 2 months. Don't do it in 2 months. I would say the earlier the better, again, but not too early that you then get new experiences that you want to talk about, and then it means that your previous writing was pointless. I would say the sooner the better. When you feel like you've got enough experience or enough to talk about, start writing. Just reflect, just talk about, if you did do 2 days in GP, you don't have to start writing a personal statement about that, but certainly take notes and think, actually, I thought about this and it made me think of this. There's fantastic sites to add little bits. So there's a website called FutureLearn, where you can enroll in free courses to do online and learn about things. There's loads of courses. There's loads of, you just go on any YouTube video and there's an ad at the end for a free kind of video where you can watch and learn and do courses and things you're interested in. If you find an aspect of medicine that you're interested in, or you want to learn more, or you've thought, actually, I saw this in clinical practice, or I saw this working in KFC and it made me think this, just showing that you've got that open mindset and that you're growing. You can just do a little course that's like, 4 hours long over the course of a month. That shows a lot. Can you put reasons which are not necessarily ethical, such as wanting to prolong human life because it's too short, when saying it's one of the reasons? Yeah. Okay, so why do you want to go into medicine? To prolong human life. You could write it for sure, and you could write an amazing personal statement. My only worry is that people might say that that's a little bit not exactly what the everyday thing that a doctor does, really. Of course, you are prolonging human life, but you're wanting to help people. You're wanting better the quality of life. Arguably, prolong human life is pointless if it's not good quality of human life. I would say just be a little bit wary about making grand statements. Interesting that you say it's not necessarily ethical, such as wanting to prolong human life. So you're clearly acknowledging that prolonging human life, if it's not a good quality of life, is actually inhumane, arguably. Yeah, you could write a perfectly good personal statement using that. You just don't want to be too much grandiosity in what you're saying. Remember to be really in touch. They're looking for someone who understands what they're about to go into in that respect. I hope that kind of answers your question. Again, personal statements are really hard. Okay, so Do No Harm is a good book to compare medicine in different countries. Yep, 100%. Wow. I mean, if you guys want to pop in the chat any book recommendations you like, please do. Would this framework apply to dentistry too? 100%. 100% it applies to dentistry. 100%. I mean, dentistry, again, your work experience, you might have got time in dental surgery or in a dental hospital, fantastic. But again, everyone appreciates that it's really hard to find work experience, not least during COVID. And so if you are able to go and spend some time in a care home, or working at a nursery, or working at a day centre for people, or being an HCA, a healthcare assistant for some time, whatever, as long as it's in a public role, there's an element of care or fulfillment there, fulfilling a need of another person, then of course you can talk about that. So I'm just having a look down here. So Himani, just to answer your question with regards to, so this actually links back to this question here. How can I talk about rejections from medical school and why I was forced to take 2 gap years? Yeah, so 100% you can talk about, don't feel like you have to 100% justify why you didn't get in or why you were forced to take 2 gap years. Don't feel like they're going to go, why were you not good enough? Or just say, I would be very much tempted to say it gives you time to reflect, and it gives you time to really think about what you want to do. And if anything, the fact that you've had multiple rejections, or you rejected twice or what have you, or forced to take 2 gap years, if anything, that shows more motivation because you're coming round for round 3 or whatever. And that's kind of amazing. I think I had a physics, a bit of a side note, but I had a physics teacher in my 6th form who always said to me, it's not a case of if you get into medicine, it's a case of when. If you are that passionate about medicine, you will get into medicine at some point. It's just a matter of when. And it's easy for me to say that. And I think, if you have had rejections or multiple rejections or what have you, that's kind of really horrible. And every time you're kind of being tested. And I probably will never fully understand kind of what that means to you and be able to dissect that within myself. But gosh, that shows so much kind of motivation there. And it shows that you're reflecting back on it and that self-improvement and really understanding, actually, you know what? This is where I think I went wrong, and I'm going to rectify that. And this is again another good example of where you can then link into the values of a medical student, or values of a doctor. Reflective practice. I reflected and I thought, actually, I didn't do this quite as well, and so I did this to try and gain more experience. I did this to try and understand this better. It's part of your story. And at the end of the day, as long as you link it and you make it a cohesive part of your story that means something to the person reading your personal statement, that's what matters. Cool. So the mark one was answered. I know Bart's used problem-based learning. What were the pros and cons of it? Also, PBL with difficulty. Okay, so PBL, problem-based learning. Yeah, so for those who don't know what problem-based learning is, you get placed into little groups at arts, little groups, 8 students, and you meet twice a week. You meet at the start of the week and you're given a mock case. So it's like a big document and it says, Mrs. Jones is a 46-year-old woman who presents to her local GP with coughing. And it's like a little story. But what it is it's kind of like, it's not a presentation case. It's not this person is here, diagnose them. What it is it's like a little story. It's like, and then she presents later and she has this and she goes in cardiac arrest and she goes this. And then 2 months later, you speak to her and she says that her life's getting better, but she thinks that her husband is depressed or what have you. And from that, you have to think about what you want to know more about. So you make a little list of learning objectives, and typically they're quite holistic. So medicine, you're showing actually, I want to know more about, she's coughing and she's struggling to walk and she feels breathless lying down, could be heart failure. So you need to learn about heart failure, you need to learn about depression, you need to learn about ECG placement for cardiac arrest or what have you. Then you also need to learn about recovery after cardiac arrest. So it's kind of holistic. So you're doing a bit of mental health there, you're doing a bit of like public health, etc., like in early interventions to prevent people from having heart failure, etc. Then you go away in the week and you learn a little bit about it, and then you come back at the end of the week and you discuss what you found. And then you kind of say, oh, I thought this, and then you have like a couple of questions like at the end. They don't mean anything, they're just questions to see how well you kind of learned the content. Does it make it difficult to know you covered all the content that you needed? So basically what they'll do is those PBLs will be related to the lectures you have. So it's not 100% PBL based. Some universities will have it 100% PBL based. You learn everything through PBL. Very rare. They typically don't really exist anymore. It's more part to complement the lectures. So what you end up doing is you end up researching, you use your knowledge from your lectures and you add like a little bit of extra research on the side and you plonk it all together. And then what Barts use is they use them in the exams. So you'll be given a PBL and they'll ask some different questions from that PBL. They expect you to kind of know. In your first term, you'll have a lecture at the end of every week that goes over the PBL, gives you all the answers to everything and everything you should know. And that kind of shows you how you should learn. So they have kind of safety net here. So you shouldn't really worry about covering all the content. Also, the tutors get given get given what we call PBL notes. They're tutor notes about the PBL, and that gives them a little bit of background because not all these people are medics. Some of the people are academics. They could be PhD students in another building, all related to healthcare, but might not be an expert. So they need notes. And these notes get illegally passed around group chats. What I'm basically saying is that PBL is a kind of unique way of learning, typically used to complement a lecture-based kind of curriculum. I really enjoyed it. Some people didn't because they felt like it was more work on the side of a PBL, or they felt like it was just collecting data and then spewing it out. I quite enjoyed it because it was a chance to talk. And as you can clearly see, I can talk for long lengths of time. But yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question. If in doubt, there's always a kind of safety net. So as I said in the first term, they are lectures to help you. Do universities look at gap year students the same as year 13 students? They want to see that you've done something related to healthcare or related to your interest in medicine during your gap year, unless there's an obvious reason why you couldn't do. But ideally, they would want to see that you spent a bit of your time in your gap year getting any sort of experience. It doesn't have to be more experience than a year 12 student would be able to get, or year 13 student, sorry. But they want to see that you've done something with your gap year to benefit your interest in medicine. With regards to, do they look at the same grades wise? The same grades required. Your offers will be firm. They won't be conditional on a grade because you've already got them. Yeah, that's about it. But basically, they just want to see that you've actually used your gap year to kind of benefit. It doesn't have to be the whole of your gap year was spent slaving away in a hospital, just a bit of it. And then you could go off to another country or travel, what have you. But you want to have used your gap year wisely. That would be the word that they would probably use. Do I need to mention the resitting exams to fit the uni's requirements? In your personal statement, no, because that will be on the UCAS system, I think. That's quite niche too, because some medical universities don't accept resits for certain subjects. Some will, some won't. Again, I would say what you need to do is you need to go onto a website like this and talk about, this is like a selection criteria for Queen Mary or Barts. So you'd want to talk about, look on the selection criteria. And if in doubt, speak to one of the admissions team. So email the admissions team for that university. What if I fed the elderly for one day? Is that enough? Fed the elderly, all the elderly? That's quite a lot. But in all seriousness, probably not. Just for if your personal statement, the only work experience you've got is I fed the elderly for one day. You could probably have learned quite a lot about that, but it's probably not enough. You could supplement it with anything, but it just needs to show that you've got a bit more experience than that. It depends what else you're going to talk about too. If you have a really heartwarming kind of, you learned something and there's a really poignant moment in that, then you could probably get away with just talking about that and then talking about other things. But again, if you've only got that to talk about work experience or like experience wise, the other things you're going to talk about are going to be hugely generic. So you're going to go back to the academic side. And that's quite dangerous really, because you're going to have some very generic kind of experiences there. I would say if you're worried about work experience and stuff, there's going to be a webinar on work experience soon. Also, again, this is the Medical Schools Council website. They have some fantastic documents for making an application, work experience. They discuss all the work experience, kind of where to start, keeping a reflective diary, making use of online resources, volunteering to spare time, etc., etc. So to the person, if you're interested, have a look on that. How should I mention how a book has helped me understand medicine? By talking about how it's made you understand medicine. Again, it's a book. You've read the book. It made me think about this. It made me understand this. It challenged my views. But that's not enough. Maybe you should then talk about what it made you do and what it made you think differently and how that links in with medicine. I would use, for reading a book, again, it can be a little bit generic. Not everything has to be amazingly unique in a personal statement, but it's a bit, you really want to show that you've done something. You're showing skills or you're showing self-improvement. And so reading a book is quite a passive way of doing that. Use it as a springboard. So I would say I read this book and it made me think this. And so what I did is I then did this. And then this made me this experience. So I read a book, I read Adam Kay's This Is Going to Hurt. And I thought, gosh, some of the stuff is really quite rough here. And there's a lot of black humor. And this made me think, how realistic is this book? And would I actually enjoy medicine? And so then what I did is I did a day of work experience in GP practice, or I read a book about mass casualty events, and that made me kind of realize the importance of pre-hospital medicine and this kind of niche specialty in medicine. And I thought, actually, you know what? I've done 10 tours or DOV, and actually there's some similar kind of skills there about the teamwork and the communication, understanding flaws in other people's things. And actually, on this experience, I made this mistake. There's loads you could use. That's what I would say. I work as an HCA in a hospital. Do I still need to get work experience? No. You're an HCA in a hospital. Work experience at the end of the day is, ideally you want to do something where you're in the vicinity of doctors and you understand what a doctor does, but it doesn't have to be working with doctors. As an HCA, you're in a hospital. it's a really hard grafting job. I did ACA work previously for like a short period of time, but God, it's knackering. And so if you do work as an HCA in a hospital, you will have so many experiences to talk about patient care and understanding and all these different kind of values that I've previously spoken about. So I would say you should have enough to talk about. And again, this is where drafting comes in. If you start drafting your personal statement, start really thinking about, okay, what would I talk about? If you haven't got enough and you feel like you don't know what a doctor does, then I would say get work experience with a doctor or somehow within a GP surgery or in psychiatry or what have you. But honestly, I think you should have plenty. Do you recommend reading other personal statements, and how would you let that help you without taking some of the points? Okay, copyright. Yeah, so I mean, similar points. Again, personal statements are kind of similar because you're talking about the similar values, but all your experience is going to be different. And so if you have an identical, everything's going to go through Turnitin when they get a personal statement. And so if a personal statement is copied from somewhere, you'll be out and you'll never be allowed to practice medicine. You're not going to get caught out if you both talked about how the doctor-patient relationship is a unique relationship and a privilege for doctors to have. Everyone talks about that. So I would say, yes, it's useful to read other people's personal statements, but not really to like steal things. It's just to see how people write and how people think and really reflect. And I think I would rather read other people's personal statements and then give them feedback, and then read my personal statement, give me feedback, rather than read their personal statement and not tell them anything and then right away. And it should be kind of a mutual help here. I hope that kind of helps. I mean, everyone just looked at 2 examples, and I think you would agree that was helpful. So it doesn't mean that you're going to write what you just saw on the screen, but it's certainly helpful to kind of see what sounds good, what kind of structures sound good. How much self-criticism is too much? Wow, what a fundamental question that is. I ask myself that on a day-to-day basis. No, I would say self-criticism is maybe not the word you're looking for. You want to reflect, and you want to be able to reflective practice is kind of understanding, maybe I've done this wrong and that. You don't want to come across as being too negative. You're trying to sell yourself at the end of the day. And so you can say that you've made mistakes. You just have to say how you've kind of rectified that and how you've become a better person because of it. And you kind of understand. You don't want to sell yourself off. You don't want to say, I did this, and this is actually a really bad thing. And that was awful, because that kind of makes you sound like you make really big mistakes. If you talk about mistakes, talk about ones that are important, but you've kind of overcome them and you've become far better and you've improved, and it made you think this. Again, it's a balance. Write it out, have a read. If it seems overly negative, then you've probably got too much self-criticism. If you're talking about all your flaws all the time, you've probably got too much self-criticism. You probably want to say if you're going to talk about where you're identifying flaws within yourself, I would say max 1 or 2. Because at the end of the day, showing that you've looked at yourself and gone, okay, I think I did this wrong, it shows that you've got reflective practice and you're able to reflect on your flaws. You've ticked that box. You wouldn't really need to do that again, because you've only got 4,000 characters, remember. You use a limited amount of space. I hope that kind of helps. Get someone else to read too. Get someone else to read who's not in your headspace, and so they can look. And if they think this is actually overly negative, you're being hard on yourself, then that's like really, really important. I've had reflective practice essays for medicine where I've had my supervisor say, I agree, but I think you're too negative. Just be nice to yourself. Talk about identifying your own flaws is just as important, if not slightly less important, than identifying what you did well. You've got to be able to identify what you do well if you want to be able to kind of succeed. Would we be able to get feedback from 6 Med while writing a personal statement? This has been really useful. I'm glad this has been really useful. I hope this helps. Yes, so here's my segue into 6 Med. So 6 Med have like really well organized, really in-depth personal statement courses available, which you can kind of invest in if you're interested. You can also get kind of tutors to help you. I would also say, if you have personal statement friends who are also applying to medicine, if you had a medical student who get them to read it, get your parents to read it, get anyone you can read it. But just be wary, sometimes people might get caught up in, if they don't fully understand what the medical school is after, they might say something which actually isn't as important. They might say, oh, well, you should probably talk about how good at cycling you are. And it's like, yeah, but that's all well and good if you're good at cycling, but maybe it's not translationable. It's got to be translationable. 6 Med also have some really good resources just generally on how to write your personal statement. So I would recommend that. This webinar is mainly aimed at just kind of, you get to talk to a medical student, in my opinion, on that. Really. How not to be cliche is loving science and people. How not to be cliche, i.e. loving science and people. I think you're always going to be cliche. But saying I've been passionate from a young age isn't always going to help. I think you're always going to have little cliches because everyone's trying to write about the same stuff. But the reason why I say try not to be cliche is if you have some really big cliches in there, cliche is defined as something which is like being overused. And so that kind of means that the personal statement is no longer unique. And you're probably saying some very generic stuff. So that's why I say try not to be cliche. Don't avoid all cliches. I'm just saying, if you're saying, I have been passionate about medicine from a young age, probably, that's a meaningless sentence without evidence. So that's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, loving science and people, everyone's going to say that. But what I would say is, that's cliche, loving science and people. But if you show me an example of a time in your life where you have shown love for both science and people, that's no longer a cliche because you're showing me and it's an experience. Do you get what I mean? What about volunteering at a care home for less than a month with the D of E? Okay, so you did the 2 birds, 1 stone trick of I volunteered at a care home to get time for D of E, to get my, it sounds like bronze, silver, D of E. Yeah, you can talk about that. Again, the length of time, I dropped in the length of time I volunteered in my personal statement because I wanted to indirectly show sustained interest and dedication. And so that's quite a nice thing to do. But you can word it cleverly. You can kind of say, I have volunteered numerous times at a place. You could just say I've been here multiple times, or repeatedly volunteer, repeatedly gone to this place, what have you. This is what people are worried about, is have I got enough? I would say you want to have more than one. You want to have like multiple occasions where you've done things. It doesn't have to be medical related. It can be care home. It can just be working at KFC. But what did you get out of it? That's what's really important. So I would say, yeah, that's more than enough. If you've learned a lot from it and you can show some good skills and things. And when you're showing these skills, I meant to mention earlier, and you've probably heard about this, but in interviews, there's something called the STARS acronym, STAR. So the STAR acronym, and it's situation, task, action, result. And so that's kind of a way of talking about a situation. I wouldn't suggest following it directly during your interview, your personal statement, but it's kind of useful to set a scene, so what would I say if I'd been volunteering in a care home? Say maybe something like, after regularly visiting a resident in a care home, I was struck at how insensitive some of the staff could be or something, and I felt this is actually bad practice, and actually, you know, made me think about burnout, and I'd read about burnout in Adam Kay's thing, and so, you know, I felt, you know, burnout's actually a really big issue, and that I actually saw that I didn't want to burn out during my sixth form or my A levels, and so I actually did a little course on mindfulness and stuff, and I think this is really important because mindfulness, you know, having insight into your own health is a core aspect of GMC good medical practice, and blah, blah, blah. You could do loads. Again, it's just what you write. Thank you. This was very insightful. I'm chuffed. Yeah. I hope this was helpful. Lab work experience for Oxbridge. Yes, Oxford and Cambridge, like research. Do you need lab work experience? I mean, you're not going to get lab work experience. Is very hard to come across unless you've had a gap year. I would say be careful, because the people reading you don't want to say anything silly. Like, I think, you know, I have a good knowledge of academia or something, because, you know, they can really grill you about that. I don't think you need to have it. But certainly be aware and write in your personal statement, you know, you have a real interest in research or something, because Oxbridge will sit there and go, "Oh, you like research? Look what we've got." So yeah, I would say you wouldn't intrinsically have to have lab work experience. If you can get it, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, any work experience is good work experience as long as you learn from it. But certainly you don't have to have had lab work experience. Even just say you spent a day in a GP surgery and it made you think, hold on, we're giving out, you know, I noticed that a lot of the consults were about mental health, and there's a lot about depression. And so that actually led me to have a read about, you know, groundbreaking meta-analysis of efficacy of antidepressants. And I found this really, you know, insightful, what have you. That will show enough interest in research, you know, and you talk about that. I don't think you have to have lab work experience for Oxford. Cool. I think I have waffled on enough for you guys. I'm going to have a look at the Q&A. I think that is all answered. So I answered all of these. Has anyone got any more questions? While you've got me here, trapped on Zoom, you're more than welcome to ask anything about medicine, etc. If not, and you'd like to have the rest of your Sunday afternoon, then please feel free to leave. I really hope this was useful. It's not particularly sunny out here in London anymore, but if you do manage to get outside, or just have a nice rest of your Sunday afternoon. Did you apply to Oxbridge? No, I didn't. Reason why was I came out my UK CAT. I got a fairly good score, and I was chuffed with my score, and I thought, you know what, this score will allow me to get into all of the UK CAT kind of schools, med schools. I am not interested in the BMAT, and I don't want to do any more admissions tests. And so I kind of just went, no, you know what, I'm not interested. And I'm kind of happy, I don't regret it. Oxbridge is big name, you know, Oxford, Cambridge, fantastic. I would say if you want to apply to Oxbridge, go for it. And it's really big and it sounds cool, and it is cool, don't get me wrong. But they're very research orientated. And so if you really like research, and you know you like research, and you know you probably want to go into research later, or some academic part of medicine, Oxbridge is your go-to. But it's not the be all and end all. And actually, if you do like research and you don't want to go, and you don't get into Oxbridge or Cambridge, or you don't, I'm here studying at the Royal Veterinary College for a year doing research. If anything, that's kind of an interesting part of my CV for when I applied to specialties. Is saying that I did research at the Royal Veterinary College at an external institution. But no, I didn't apply to Oxford. Are there any textbooks with all the med school content you need, kind of like A-level GCSE? So this is the age-old question, and usually there's someone who asks this on the first day of med school: is, do you have a syllabus? And they go, well, not entirely. The General Medical Council have something called Outcome for Graduates, which is a big book that has all the outcomes that a junior doctor should have. But no, essentially everything, you should know everything that the lectures say, which is too much and you'll never be able to comprehend. So this is the skill of going to university, and it's the same as Ayla. It's the same as any other course. You have to be quite clever with what you're kind of learning. I would say that's kind of an intrinsic part of the transition from A-levels to university or IB to university. It's being able to understand what you need to learn, what is not so important, and how much time you should spend learning things. You'll only learn when you finally get to university. But what I would say is don't worry about it too much now. Would it be good to include my EPQ? My topic is, yeah, 100%, 100%. But don't just name drop it. Talk about what you kind of learned from it and what it made you. Certainly you could use, my kind of primary example here is, I would say something like, especially if you've done work experience in hospitals or something, you can say like, I was in hospital and you could see like burnout of doctors. And I was surprised at how kind of fatigued some of these medical professionals are. And this made me think about this and made me think about how the GMC require doctors to have an insight of health, but arguably if you become quite mentally ill, sometimes you can get a loss of what's called like insight into your own health. And so this made me actually want to learn more about this. And so I did an EPQ in a topic related to the mental health of junior doctors. Probably write something similar to that. Anything, I would just use it as a piece of evidence. How have you found life as a medical student? Yeah, not bad. I mean, it has its ups and its downs. It's fairly busy. I've done all my preclinical years now, which were pretty intense. Certainly the end of year 2 is like a big push because it's before you kind of go into hospitals. And I did have a few hospital placements and GP placements and what have you, but there's a lot of kind of content. But then you move on to your clinical years where you're based in hospitals most of the time and out as a lecture theatre. And actually that's far more enjoyable. What I would say is I enjoy, the academic side, but I also enjoy the extracurricular side. And I'm part of the running club and I have other interests and I'm a big coffee drinker and I go around to coffee shops with friends and things like that. So you need to have another part of your life, really. You still need to be able to enjoy other parts of life. If you don't have enough time to enjoy extracurricular activities at medical school, you're either in your final year of medicine or you're doing it wrong. That's what I would say. How long did it take you to write your personal statement? Who checked it for you? I'd say it took about 2.5 to 3 months. My teacher checked it for me, and I think my mum checked it for me. So my teacher was the main one, my main port of call. And then I got someone else's dad or something to check it for me. I actually emailed it to a doctor that I knew that I did my work experience with, and he gave the least helpful advice. So don't stress about getting a medical professional to read your personal statement, because often your teachers will probably have the best advice. Skills learned from St. John's Ambulance. I'm struggling. I assume you mean you're struggling to like tease out what skills. Yes, you can talk about your skills learned, and I would say show that in an example. You don't have to specifically state it, but show that and show a bit of reflection. Show, actually from this I learned and it made me think about this, and so I did this differently at my next time at St. John's Ambulance. Again, it comes back to my tip number 4, quality, not quantity. Why did you choose Barts? I chose Barts because they had really good student satisfaction ratings. That was something I went off. I didn't go off the leaderboards. Everyone there seemed quite pleasant. People were very chuffed. They seemed to produce very good doctors. There was a chance to intercalate. I'm part of the trauma sciences program, so I get extra teaching from trauma surgeons and people with the air ambulance. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the fact that it was part of Queen Mary, but it has a separate campus, and so it's quite an intimate atmosphere. That's what I enjoyed. I would say you can't spend enough. You can never spend enough time picking the medical school. It's something that I kind of regret from a sixth formers perspective, is that schools kind of make you go, just pick one and move on. Spend some time, spend a long time, go and speak to people about that, have a really good look around the place, because you're going to spend 5 years there. I also chose Barts because it's in East London, and so there's London placements, and I'd never lived in London. I grew up in Dorset, which is like southwest of, that, in the middle of nowhere with a lot of cows. So I wanted to go to London, and so here I am. So it's a multitude of factors, and really you have to find where you enjoy. Focus on what you enjoy and how happy the students are, and if they create good doctors. Don't worry about these big The Guardian 2022 complete university guide, because that's a load of rubbish if you don't enjoy it. You can go to Oxford, but if you have a horrible time, then it was better you went to any other uni. Is there a P structure to personal statement, like point, evidence, explain? Yeah, 100%. You can kind of use that. Just be wary you don't want to make it too kind of fragmented in that respect, and too kind of formulaic. But yes, point, evidence, explain. But that's what I'm kind of getting behind, is you always want to have evidence. And so this is your kind of personal, the kind of evidence that you, and what you've learned from it. I say, yeah, there is a P structure to personal statement. I didn't use it, but I think people do. Sorry, so I'm just going to have a read about can I mention something along the lines of, my rejection from medical school gave me the opportunity to reflect on myself more than for me. Got a job as a this year. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just reading, I'm not sure if other people can see, but Himani said something. Can I mention something along the lines of? Yeah, I really like that. I would say don't make it too narrative. So that's good. That's a good starting point. And I really like that. Experience there is fundamental to what you've kind of reflected on here. And I really like that. And I think 100% you should use that. Just be wary that you need to show kind of how certain things made you feel. So don't waste too many. At the end of the day, it's 4,000 characters. Don't waste too many characters just talking about exact specifics. So I really like the start. Then I oversaw doctors' reflection through making a list of reasons why their course of action had a devastating result, and resulting from members of staff and listening to their constructive criticism. I think I oversaw doctors' reflection. Okay, cool. You oversaw that. It doesn't really matter what else they say there. What did that make you think, and what did you learn from that? And I think you kind of answer that above. So that last bit was maybe superfluous. I hope that kind of helps. Again, I am not a specific tutor when it comes to these personal statements. So when you do write a personal statement and you're interested, feel free to email me if you wanted. But certainly there's lots of different resources out there. Ask as many people as you can. 6med have some great resources. Should I mention the impact of COVID on my grades and work experience? Everyone's in the same boat. No, I wouldn't bother. If there's a specific one on your grades, perhaps, but on your work experience, no, because everyone else has had that in the same respect. I mean, if it's something very unique to you, i.e. you have long COVID or something, maybe it's worth talking about that. But I would say no. If it applies to everyone, don't bother. Because there's also the fear that it then sounds like you're making excuses. And the excuses are valid, then that's fair enough. But you don't want to spend a load of characters saying that, oh, I didn't do this because this, and I didn't do this because this. It was a waste of characters. Talk about what you did do and focus on that. Cool. I think that's everything. I think that is all the questions answered. I'm just reading the chat. Crikey, Himani, that's horrible. I'm very sorry about that. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yes. And I would recommend, yes, definitely mention your hardship there. And you can 100% link that in with current affairs, with different cases. You talk about the GMC, 100%. You can talk about the kind of recent movement within the NHS, moving towards the kind of further understanding of kind of race discrimination within the NHS. Gosh, 100%. Yeah, please do. Yeah, 100%. You mentioned that. Yeah, I would, because that's really unique. That's a fundamental, unique part of you, and that shaped you to who you are today. And if a personal statement at the end is a statement about yourself, a statement as to why you want to go into medicine, and the fact that you've been through that hardship and still want to get into medicine and want to make a difference and appreciate the fundamental kind of barriers that have been constructed by society and by the kind of application process, that is kind of really unique to you and just shows that you are so committed. And yeah, 100%. Are you able to link your email? Yes, I can kind of flick through here. It's my Royal Veterinary College one at the moment. J Thompson 21 at rvc.ac.uk. I'll give you my Barts one, but I check my RVC one more currently. Cool. I'm very glad, Himani. I really hope you found it helpful too. I think that's honestly everything, guys. Any more questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a lovely afternoon. Get some rest, recovery. Fantastic. I hope you found it helpful. At the end of the day, I think personal statements are a form of artwork, and so they are hugely subjective. They're not like a maths test. They're not like a UK CAT. So yeah, I'll swing to the end, just check some more questions. No questions from the audience. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everyone. I think there should be another one next week, another one of these webinars and similar. It could be me, or it could be another person if it's a kind of specific talk. I will have a chat to my team, but all I can say is thank you ever so much. This is fully recorded, so you'll be able to access it later. Have a lovely weekend and a lovely week.